The issue of increasing NATO European members' spending on direct investments in defense instruments, 3.5% of GDP, and collateral security, 1.5% of GDP, in the medium to long term has an obvious solution: to avoid budgetary constraints on states that could harm other sectors and hinder development. It is necessary to create a financial investment architecture that integrates public and private capital. In fact, the European Parliament has approved a motion in this direction. And, significantly, the newly proposed Defence, Security and Resilience Bank, DSR Bank, is expected to include not only EU financial entities, currently banks, but also participation from the United Kingdom, Canada, Australia, Japan, Norway, with the notable presence of the American firm J.P. Morgan. The goal is to achieve an investment capacity of €100 billion and beyond. I imagine the Italian government is currently assessing whether, and to what extent, to encourage national financial actors, whether private or public, to participate in this financial infrastructure. However, I suggest that this evaluation should prioritize the creation of a bilateral Italian U.S. financial investment instrument, without excluding participation in the DSR Bank. It is still unclear how the EU will technically respond to U.S. pressure to invest $600 billion in the American economy. However, since this is a condition for obtaining a reduction in U.S. tariffs, it is likely that some measures will be taken in that direction. How can this issue, which is not only economic but also technical, given that the EU cannot compel member states, let alone private European entities, to invest in the United States, be transformed into an opportunity? For Italy, I propose the creation of a specialized financial instrument aimed at facilitating investments by Italian actors in the U.S. market, and, here lies the key, vice versa. In fact, Washington does not prohibit U.S. actors from investing in Italy, even though it effectively creates a form of obligation for Italy, as an EU member, to participate in European investments in America. The core idea is this: through a well-designed instrument, Italian actors invest in American ventures, while U.S. actors also invest in activities based in Italy and potentially in surrounding regions of mutual interest, Africa, for example. I envision an Italo-American investment bank or a similar structure, open to global investors, built on a mixed public-private capital base. Such an institution could eventually give rise to an Italian Nasdaq, interconnected with its U.S. counterpart. This last point remains central in my thinking, as I observe too many high-quality Italian startups being forced to migrate, mostly to the United States, where the private investment capital cycle is abundant. This issue has already been raised emphatically in the Draghi report to the EU. The rest of the bilateral infrastructure is still under study. To explore it, I reviewed the official statements following recent bilateral meetings between Italy and the United States. In the April meeting, one can observe the early signs of a shared investment infrastructure, both financial and industrial, across several key technological sectors, with relevance to both military and civilian applications. There are several concrete developments, the most recent being the agreement between the Italian Space Agency and SpaceX to include Italian exo-instruments in the mission to Mars. This topic was already emphasized in the April joint communiqué, where both nations committed to increasing collaboration within the U.S. lunar program Artemis, which envisions a future shipyard for the construction of large spacecraft. And other initiatives, with hundreds of innovative spillovers into the civilian market. Therefore, to achieve U.S. investments in Italy that are equal to, or even greater than, Italian investments in America, a structured infrastructure is needed to efficiently organize this bilateral investment capital cycle, potentially open to investors from other compatible nations. What is concrete and already tangible in this note? I've recorded the activities of Italian private entities, starting in 2024, with a transatlantic mission, namely the Transatlantic Harmonic Foundation and the Transatlantic Investment Committee, in contact with both the Ministry of Enterprises, MIMIT, and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, as well as other institutions including 14 regions and Confindustria. Not to mention the Italian-American Chamber of Commerce, all of which are working to build a bridge for reciprocal investments between Italian and U.S. entities. Best-case scenario, Italy will lose a portion of its exports to the United States due to tariffs. While this can be managed through market alternatives and agreements between exporters and importers, it will nonetheless pose a challenge. The systemic solution, though not applicable to all economic sectors, is the one outlined here.